son, where'd you find this?
Don't be offended by the truth. They be offended because you called out the truth. Simple as that. They don't want to hear any other narrative that makes them look bad.
One thing I can't stand at this big grown age is somebody who acts like cause and effect does not exist. Like, yes, your actions caused this outcome. Yes, what you did lit the match. Like, why are you surprised and playing victim?
Guys, Chico, they never lie.
That's how you know somebody doesn't respect you. They listen to reply, not to be understood. They cut you off. They minimize what actually matters to you. They laugh at your boundaries, and then they call you sensitive when you try to hold the line. They show up late, they cancel last minute, forget the things you've told them, because in their world, your time, your energy, even your voice aren't a priority. They're just an option. You see, there are two kinds of people. Those who adjust when they realize they've actually hurt you, and those who expect you to adjust so they don't have to change. You don't need to be disrespected loudly to be disrespected deeply. Sometimes you'll see it. It's just in their tone, in their patterns, in the silence after you're known. Respect isn't what they say when they're watching. It's how they act when they think you'll. Examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
It was a way of making me feel that they were a part.
You see it on the screen. It's built up that same school is pretty energetic now. We got state peoples out there. We got brains flowing. We got the brains machine.
Good evening, beautiful people. Peace and blessings. Glory, praise, and honor to the Most High. Happy Wednesday to the folks. Shout outs to my poets, writers, and creators. You see the title. This is an important one. All of them are important. But this is just one that I think needs to be spread more worldwide. I think it's a conversation that we need to address. Forget the algorithm, forget the politics, and everything in between. This is serious. I'm gonna bring this clip up here in a second. I got Sydney in the studio. I want to bring her up on the big screen. Do me a solid, repost, share, let the people know that we are on. Let's get this started. Good evening. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing pretty good. Just a normal day of cleaning up the mess my kids make and keeping up with the stuff around the house.
Coming near you, Lifetime.
Yep. What's up? No, we're not reading a book right now. I'm doing something.
So, to the people that are watching, you see the title. This goes a little left. Just a little left. Which you'll see here in a second. I'm going to let this woman get her bars off. She had some words for us. I never seen this video before. But once it's been introduced to me, there's no not seeing it. So I'm going to let it run. And we're going to talk about it. All right, let's see here.
He does not have any drugs in his system. Does he?
I don't know.
Does he? Does he?
Hold on. Hey.
No.
One time.
What? You're gonna hurt my baby.
The states are taking children, giving them to somebody else for money that they get from the federal government. That means that all 50 states are involved in government subsidized child trafficking. It's a ring. It is the largest and most pervasive child trafficking ring in the history of the world by sheer money and numbers.
I will share with you on the unlimited power of Child Protective Services. I served in the Georgia State Senate, and after 4 years of viewing the ruthless and unsparing actions of Child Protective Services, also called CPS, which I will use tonight, I wrote a scathing report entitled The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services. The report cost me my Senate seat. However, there are causes worth losing over, and this is one.
It was put into law in 1997 by Bill and Hillary Clinton, and I said it that way on purpose. And it is a law that literally steals money from the Social Security Fund and gives this money to the states in order to incentivize them to kidnap babies.
This is not to say that there are not those children in wretched situations who need to be removed. There are, and we all agree. But tonight, I'm talking about those children removed from their homes intentionally for profit. Children are seized unnecessarily from their families due to the federal aid created in 1974 entitled the Adoption and Safe Families Act. It offers financial incentives to the states that increase adoption numbers. To receive the adoption incentives or bonuses, local CPS must have more children. They must have more merchandise to sell. Funding is available when a child is placed in a foster home with strangers or placed in a mental health facility and medicated, usually against the parents' wishes.
Every child, once you've added it all up, is worth approximately $1 million to the state. But we've been told that this is a $60 to $80 billion a year industry, meaning the federal government is taking $80 billion a year and giving that money to all of the 50 states to kidnap children.
This system breeds off of the fact that you do not know the law and you do not know your rights, and you choose not to comprehend them as if you can't use it within your own defense.
The baby does not have.
Sorry, no Cardi B today. Absolutely disgusting. And people like her, you put your life on the line to spread a message. And what do you get in return? They want to silence you. They don't want you telling the people this stuff. Why would you want to keep this away from anybody? Why would you go out of your way to keep somebody's mouth shut when it comes to taking somebody, uprooting them from someone's home, also that you can make money off of it? Your initial thoughts?
When I initially saw the title, it's not what I anticipated, but I've heard so many stories like this. I've even had my own experience with CPS. Luckily, it didn't go as far as some of the stories I've heard of. But in my lifetime, documentaries I've watched, stories, news stories, I've heard of some pretty horrendous experiences people have had with CPS, and it's definitely an issue that does not get talked about enough. I find it hard to classify it as child trafficking. I guess by definition it kind of makes sense, but to me, I'm hesitant to kind of place them in the same category as like people like our government officials that have participated in actual child trafficking. But I can definitely see where the comparison comes from. It's sad because, like with the police, like with politicians, not all of them are bad. There are some that genuinely enter to do good, to try and make a difference, to help people. But there are a lot of bad eggs. There's a lot of bureaucratic BS behind the scenes. There, of course, is the financial incentive to maximize the number of children that are removed and do better than they did last year, and all of that kind of metric-based monitoring and whatnot. But there's definitely an issue in the sense that CPS can act before the court system steps in. And so I've heard many stories of children being adopted out to another family, even without like the court participating in the whole process. Like by the time the parents find out that their kids are gone, it's already too late. Because with adoption, once a child is adopted, unless the parents that adopted the child agree to terminate the adoption, there's nothing you can do.
I'm not really well versed in the adoption process, or how bad it can be, how flawed the system is, how accurate they are with the vetting process of getting kids into loving homes, doing background checks on these people who are signing up for it. I've only gotten negative responses or feedback off of what they upload on social media. You know, I've covered a number of these things, and you hear CPS, you think this is to protect you from yourself and from being in dangerous environments where adults, they are irresponsible. That's the only way I know how to say it. They're irresponsible. They're a threat to you and they're a threat to everybody else. We are here to protect you and give you the best possible chance at life as we can. But, you know, the more stories come out, the more conspiracies, the more conversations you hear about people getting snatched up and they're being put in containers and all this other stuff. Is like, there's really a market for everything. And I agree, not every single person is moving or maneuvering in the ways that this woman here is speaking about. But it is something that should be brought to the people's attention. You know, when I watched the video for the first time, it was disgusting. I was sick to my stomach. I hated that this was even a thing, but I knew that I shouldn't be surprised. They have a market for all this stuff. So my thoughts and prayers go out to the kids first and foremost. I should have just started off with that. They're the ones that are suffering the most, whether or not they're being allegedly trafficked or they're just being mistreated and misplaced. We should not be using our resources in the ways that is being described here. And why nobody is talking about this, it baffles me. It will always baffle me. And that's why I do it. Even if nobody really cares or sees it, at least you know somebody on the internet cares about this. Why do you think people don't talk about this enough?
I think a lot of people just don't know. Unless you are reading these stories, they come up on the news, or you've gone through it yourself, or you know family members that have gone through it. I just don't think people know very much about it. I think a lot of people who don't understand how it works associate CPS more with the other direction, where they're like, yeah, they're saving children from evil mothers that are using drugs and blah, 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 blah. But they don't realize how many mistakes happen. One case that specifically came to mind that in relation to this was in 2023, I believe it was, a mother she had 2 kids already, and right before she had her baby, she had eaten a poppy seed salad before she went into labor. And certain hospitals have a drug testing policy, and as a result of her eating that salad, she tested positive for opium. Because if you eat enough poppy seeds, it will show up in minute amounts in your bloodstream. And so they took her baby right from the hospital. They reported her, and if I remember correctly, I'm trying to find the actual time frame, but I think it took her at least 5 weeks to get her baby back, which, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the importance of bonding with your newborn and the importance of the early, like when you breastfeed a baby, the earliest milk is some of the most nutritious and provides a lot of the antibodies and stuff like that a baby needs. They're missing out on all of that. She missed out on the entire newborn period of her child's life and was denied the ability to bond with her child and feed her child during the time that she had lost custody. Also, I think it was 2013, not 2023. But even so, these are stories that I've heard before. I myself, I've mentioned it before. I've had an experience with my first son. He was born in San Jose, and he was born in the middle of 2021. And in January of 2022, my husband joined the military. And so he was sent out to boot camp. And during that time, we were moving around a lot because we were living at his stepdad's house for a while, but his house was not in very good condition. So around, I think I was around 20 weeks or something like that. Halfway through, we moved to his grandmother's house. And then when it got time for we were getting close to it being time, we moved in with my mom because she was close to the hospital. And we stayed with her for like 2 months. And then when Everest was like 6 weeks old, 8 weeks old, we moved to Colorado to stay with our friend. And then once McKinley joined, in like what he had the date set, like once January came, he went to boot camp. I ended up moving to, or I think we went to Sacramento first. That's where he was taken to go to boot camp from. And I stayed with his older brother and his wife until Mick got out of boot camp, which was 3 months. And then after that, then I went to Illinois and I was living in a hotel, like an extended stay hotel. And so we had one address on file, which was his stepdad's house, but then we moved around so frequently, and then we moved to the hotel, and obviously with everything going on, like the new baby and dealing with all of the insurance and paperwork and everything, like I can't keep track of everything. And so our address on record did not change. And I was in therapy at the time, like an online therapist, online service. It wasn't even through a doctor. It was through one of those like help apps and whatever. And during one of the time periods, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I think Everest he was under a year. But I was hit as a child. Like my parents would slap me, would hit me with a spoon, typical like 50s, 60s generation parent punishment. And one time my kid was freaking out in the car seat. He didn't want to go in the car seat. And out of frustration, I instinctively like smacked his cheek. And at that moment, because of my background in psychology, I was like, oh, snap. I've absorbed my parents' tendencies to use corporal punishment. And I don't want to be like that. Like, I don't want to do that to my kids. I've always been like, I don't want to use physical punishments because I know how much it can cause effects to their bonding with me and stuff like that. And I didn't want him to feel scared of me. And so I told the therapist that I had done that. And I was like, it was kind of an awakening moment, because I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I'd picked up those behaviors from my parents, and I don't want to do that. And to me, it was like a mind-opening experience. I didn't see it as like, this is a troubling pattern. Like, it was just a rote reflex. And I told her, and I didn't think anything of it. And then probably like a couple months into me staying in Illinois, I get a call from the front lobby saying that CPS was there to talk to me. And they said that they had a report of child abuse from a medical professional. And they basically also categorized me as like non-compliant and avoidant, because they had made contact. They tried to make contact with me in California, but I wasn't there because the address was wrong. And so they basically said that I was like dodging the authorities and had this whole fabricated story of how I was being difficult, and I was like trying to run away and hide and everything like that. I was like, no, literally, I've been here. I explained, and the CPS workers that showed up, they basically, like with me, they sat me down, they interviewed me, they asked me questions about my parenting, they asked me questions about like, well, what do you feed him? How do you play with him? Can you afford clothes and all that stuff? And like obviously I buy him toys, educational stuff. Like I would take him out and show him to the museums in the area and all that stuff. And so I explained the whole situation. I explained me moving around. I explained everything, and even the slapping incident. And I got lucky. The CPS worker that I heard her outside the door because she basically left the room. She's like, give me a second. Let me talk to my supervisor. And the one quote I still remember to this day is she was out there. I hate MF therapists. She was like, they always make up these stories and whatever. Like she was angry at her supervisor for the therapist wasting their time. And so they closed the case and they're like, sorry for bothering you. Like clearly you're fine. Like you're not doing anything wrong. Obviously I never trusted that therapist again. I stopped talking to her from that moment. But I got lucky. Some people don't get lucky like that. As we saw, or as I explained, the one woman with the poppy seed bagel or salad, she lost her baby for over a month. I've heard of parents losing their kids to very minor incidences as well. I've heard of them being taken away for reports that somebody else made that were anonymous and nobody ever knew who made those reports, but they still have their kids taken away from them. I've even heard the flip side where CPS gives the children back to knowingly abusive parents and then the child gets killed. I just heard a story like that where there was a woman, I watched her interrogation videos. She had a 6-year-old boy, and she openly admitted to her father that she was having thoughts of wanting to kill him, wanting to do things to him, didn't think that she was a good mother, and blah, 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 blah. And he was like actively trying to get custody of the son. But they took the kid away and gave it to the father and then gave it back to her and then gave it to somebody else, and then they gave it back to the mother and she killed him. And I've heard a lot of stories like that too. I like watching interrogation videos, and there's a lot of child abuse, child death stories that I've heard of where they just want to give them the chance. They want to give the parents the opportunity to be a parent to their child and give them the opportunity to like reconcile and blah, 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 blah. Well, the child deserves to be with the parent. And then the children end up getting abused or killed. And there's a lot wrong with the system. They either overuse the system or they ignore the red flags and don't use the system like it was intended. And there's also a lot of it's like different in every state. And so there isn't a flat, like, this is the procedure no matter where you are. Like, for the most part, police in every state, if you get arrested in every state, it's going to be the same process. It's not like that with CPS. And other certain things will qualify in some states that don't qualify in others. And so I think there's a lot of issues. I don't even know where to begin to say what all the issues are, but they're like oversight issues, and like the fact that they can act before the courts do, I think is also egregious. And just the fact that they discount the parents immediately in cases where it's a minor issue, but then they ignore actual abusive behavior in parents that do deserve to lose their children. It's crazy.
Yeah, everything has its cracks and its flaws. I don't expect a perfect system in any field. What I do expect is you to try to make it better as much as possible. And to be fair, I've heard similar stories. It was one maybe a day or two ago where they were prosecuted, they served time, and they still ended up getting the kid back, and that didn't end well. It's like, how does that happen? How does that work? You know, somebody clearly, it's like either you're not doing your job, you don't have enough manpower to do your job properly, or it's something else going on. I think it's a combination of everything that you said and then some. Because there's no way in the world you're going to tell me that you can put a bunch of kids with a woman who sticks autistic kids in a barn or a shed and leaves them tied up and tell me that you didn't see this problem. You didn't know what type of background was attached to this man or this woman. I still just try to wrap my mind around the idea that you could turn this into a business Are you just snatching kids up on purpose? Are you really doing your job? Like you just say, they tried to come for you, but were you really doing your job? It's like I don't know. This whole thing is like backwards to me. I hate it for everybody and anyone who was involved in this. For one, maybe you shouldn't have kids with people that you don't see yourself getting married to in the first place. So you don't even be in that type of situation. But let me ask you a question. How much of this is a business for them and actually a service for the actual kids that need the actual help? Like, are people taking this job just so they can profit off of these kids? And they're masking it as, oh, I want to be a good citizen and I want to step in and I want to do the right thing and I want to save these young girls and these young boys from getting the hell beat out of them by these freaked out old men and women who are druggies, or they just don't have what it takes to face another human being. After the files and all of these other things have come out, it's like, and then this woman is telling you this is what's actually happening. Is this about protecting the kids, or is this about enlarging their wallets? Matter of fact, how much do CPS workers make? What are their salaries?
I just looked it up. So the organization itself has a budget of from ESSER, which is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. They get about $979 million. And then they also get federal relief funding through federal and state grants totaling about $249 million. And they're expected to have, that was just for 2023, and they're expected to have $807 million left over for 2024 and 2025 investments. So they make a lot of money, but they didn't seem to use very much of it. They used maybe 300 to 400 million. For the pay, the low end of the scale, an entry level position would start around 60,000 a year, and top earners can make up to 115,500 annually. They said the average salary is roughly 80,000 per year. They get, for a front desk job, it looks like generally they get about $14.50 an hour. A receptionist can make $15.70, but a social worker themselves could get $25, $26 an hour.
So there's really there's money in it.
I think also the other thing is their attachment to foster care, because that I think a lot more people know about, of the awful things that can come out of foster care. Granted, again, not every foster parent is terrible. There are some fantastic families out there that genuinely do it because they love kids. But there's also a lot of people out there that are doing it because they get money from the state for having foster kids and let the kids live in really terrible conditions. Not to mention, orphanage type facilities, the like group home foster care is not the best place either, because usually they're getting the kids that are difficult or traumatized, whereas adoptions are typically kids under 5, because very small percentages of adopters want older children. Most of them want a baby or toddler.
Yeah, makes sense. I think that whole thing is just sad, man. And one of the reasons why I'm so perplexed with the whole thing is because it's like between foster care, the educational system, I always looked at those two as being something that was just going to be a priority above most things. That's what you would invest in the most: books, uniforms, education, enlightening the minds, making sure the teachers are properly taken care of so that they can adequately do their job. If you have kids who grew up a little rough around the edges, that money and that funding would go into locations that are structured to better facilitate a healthy environment for these youngins. The kids are your future. Get them therapy, get them the type of help that is necessary to break away from habits and things of that nature that would turn them into statistical criminals and all the other stuff. We don't really seem like there's a huge concern or urgency to pour into this type of stuff. Every time I see a story about foster care, they do it for the money. They do it so they can have an extra source of income so they can keep their lights and their bills paid. When it comes to actually being a parent and all this other stuff, people don't really have too much concern for it. This woman is saying that they are out here using the system in a way that benefits them more than it does the children. I wish she would have been more clear that it's not everybody. You can't just say, or you can't say this when it's not that. It's not all, but I understand what she meant. Some people are not going to take it that way. If you have kids out here in foster care, some of them run away and they end up homeless on the street. A lot of them are out here. It's for a reason, and they get forgotten. And it's all sad. This is all sad. If you bastards are making money off of snatching kids up and selling them and moving them from house to house, and that's just foul. That's foul as hell. And there's a special place for you.
Kids who are taken away from their families, with exception to those whose parents are like genuinely abusive, this is like foster kids, stuff like that, they're at higher risk for everything. Higher risk for mental illnesses, higher risk for drug abuse, higher risk for teenage pregnancy, higher risk for joining gangs, higher risk for dropping out of school, never going to college, higher risk for mental health issues later in life, for autoimmune diseases, for what do you call it? MS and stuff like that affect like your joints and stuff like that. They're more likely to have shorter lifespans. They're more likely to abuse their own kids. They're more likely to have lower incomes, be homeless. Pretty much all of the negative life outcomes, you're more likely to experience those if you are taken away from the families that are supposed to be caring for you. Again, granted, the exception is parents that are genuinely abusive, but being put in foster care increases your risk for pretty much all negative life outcomes. And one of the what do you call it? The arguments that I've heard against CPS is that one of the things that they do wrong is they're villainizing the parents without making any efforts to rehabilitate them. It's like the same type of idea of the prison system, the drug abuse system, where they're more interested in like, you did this, you did that illegal thing, we're going to punish you, good luck. Where it really, really should be, like in other countries, they have drug programs that you enter in. It's more of like a home situation. They teach you like therapeutic practices, how to work with your mental illness. They help you figure out your medication. They teach you different strategies for overcoming it. And then I think they have like a graduated type living program where you can live while you're still recovering, but not in the active drug addiction stage. And then they like keep following up with you. They, all of these places already have healthcare provided. And it's a long process of re-educating them how to live without drugs. And their rescindance rate is quite low in comparison to what we see in the United States. And I think that is definitely something that needs to be put into place with CPS, where instead of just coming after parents, you did this wrong, I'm taking your children, and that's the end of story, you don't deserve your kids. Like, they need to have more programs for actually working with those parents to make them better parents, or discover the reason behind why they took the kids away in the first place, such as, which would prevent issues such as the one that I mentioned earlier with the poppy seed bagels or muffin, whatever it was, salad. Because sometimes they're taken away for things that the parents didn't, or they did do, but it wasn't illegal at all in any sense. I've heard of Karens getting parents, getting kids taken away just because they kept making false allegations. So working more with the parents rather than just like speculation, your kid's gone. And also by having more people working with the parents over time, and not just one person, like it should be a whole group of people, therapists, sociologists, whatever, like psychologists, all the whole works, to understand the family dynamic, to understand who are the caretakers that would be the best fit, asking the kids, like allowing the kids to have input in these things, which often is not the case. They don't get to choose which parent they want to go to, even though the kids are going to know best which are the ones that are going to abuse or be like dangerous to them. Ignoring the kids that are afraid of their parents. If there was a lot more engagement, involvement from different parties, it could also prevent children from being put back with the person that is most likely going to hurt them. I've heard of this from, I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, but there have been so many of these documentaries that I've watched where kids have ended up dead. And a very common thread was CPS was contacted, people had been complaining, parents were worried, parents had, the parents of those parents, like the grandparents, had custody temporarily, but then the state was like favoring them going back to their parents, even though the kids, the grandparents, the neighbors, the friends of the kids, like all of them were saying that person is dangerous. They still put them back to prioritize the parental relationships. So if there were more eyes, more professionals, more expertises involved in the process, it could prevent a lot of these issues on both ends. Children taken away from good parents and children being put back with bad parents from reoccurring as much. And I think the court systems really need to be more involved. Like, I think really there should be the same as like a warrant to enter somebody's property or whatever. Like, the removal of children without the presence of the court is wrong. Like, if people aren't allowed to just come into your car or come into your house or search through your belongings without your consent, they shouldn't be allowed to take your child without your consent. It's wild that we don't have anything that, like, you have to go to a court, get this signed, get the police involved, get whatever involved, to make sure that this is a valid thing. And yeah, and then also just in the one case that I mentioned, doing it off of one drug test, really? Like, there isn't a way to detect like the amounts, or like go to her house and check her house and see that she, like, it's very often clear when somebody's doing drugs because they're going to have a certain lifestyle if they're doing drugs. There's very, very few functional hardcore drug users. Most of the time, once you are addicted to drugs like that, it affects every manner of your life. Your house is going to be a mess. You're going to have the implements out around your house. So yeah, involving the authorities more, having different groups of people involved rather than just CPS, I think is a super, super important step. And then again, listening to the children, because I've again heard that a lot, where they ignore what the child is saying. The child literally is like, I don't want to go back with my mom. I don't want to go back with my mom. And they put them there anyways, and stuff happens. So, yeah.
Sad situation we in. Man, I have nothing else really to add to this other than God be with these kids, and to the ones that's going out of their way to look after any of them, whether or not they infants or they're right there at that door knocking on 13 and they got that attitude. If you going out of your way to try to give them better than what they had, bless your heart. There's no excuse to be making that type of money a year, have all of those resources at your exposure, and you don't have a better system. That whole thing is broken to me. I would love to hear more stories from men and women who are in that field, just like to get an inside idea of what they really deal with on a daily basis. I want to show them that video of what she said, and then come back, and then we go down this block again, because for whatever reason, people don't tend to care about that type of stuff until it's happening to them. That's why we're here, and that's why it is going to be a replay worthy conversation. If you want to know what was happening within this discussion, share it with somebody. They might need it. They might actually need to hear it. They might need to pass it on to somebody else. You know, this country is greedy, so I wouldn't really be surprised if they were doing what they were doing. That's all I got. Shout outs to the people that are watching. Shout outs to you. If you have anything you want to say before we close out, cool. If not, cool. I appreciate you for being here this evening. And yeah, let's put more respect on this topic.
Also, I just want to throw this out there. I don't remember if I've said it on the stream or not, but I am actually a case of the good side of things, how it can turn out, where I am adopted myself. I was adopted as a baby because my biological mom was 21 at the time. She's still in college. She was living with her parents. She and my dad at the time, or my dad at that time period wasn't going to be a fit parent because he had some mental health issues. I have contact with both of them now. I'm friends with both of them. And I am an example of how it can benefit a person, because I definitely would not have had the same lifestyle if I grew up with my birth mother than I did with the parents that I have now. Because the parents that adopted me, they were far more well off. They were older parents. Sure, we've had our issues, but they provided me with a lot of opportunities, educational opportunities that allowed me to become who I am today. But it's not always the case, as we just saw. And before we end, I wanted to kind of go over some of the signs that children are being abused, because oftentimes it's not going to be obvious if a parent or a foster parent, it doesn't even have to be the biological parent. It could be a uncle, it could be a babysitter, it could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it could be a number of people that have close contact with the child. But because of the reporting things when there isn't anything there, or not noticing when there is something there, I just kind of wanted to go over some of the symptoms and things to look out for in terms of child abuse. So one of the biggest ones, obviously, that most people would think of is unexplained injuries. If a child is limping mysteriously or has strange bruisings, cuts, is like wearing, especially with older kids, if they're like hiding their face or they're like putting their hair in front of their face, they flinch if people try and come near them or touch them. If they have burns, fractures, other types of injuries that don't have any clear explanation. A very common one is they'll be like, oh, I fell, oh, I tripped, oh, I ran into the wall, or something like that. Like, they'll come up with some really vague excuse, but not have any story behind it. They just brush it off. Oh, I don't want to talk about it, whatever, it was embarrassing, no big deal. These can all be signs that a child has been physically hurt by somebody they are being cared for. And additionally, with emotional and psychological abuse, things will come up. You might see it happen. You might hear the parent like shouting unnecessarily, manipulating their child, humiliating their child, criticizing them, making jokes that are clearly hurtful, or that aim to reduce the self-worth of that child. A child, if you aren't able to witness these acts by the guardian, you might see the child isolating themselves, have severe issues with self-deprecation, self-esteem issues, be extremely nervous to talk to people, be behind in their emotional development where they don't know how to handle their emotions. They might cry really easily, and they might have a hard time like handling criticism and stuff like that. Granted, it is important to not just assume that a shy child is being abused, because It could just be a personality trait, but if they seem unnecessarily afraid of communication with adults, that could be a sign that something is happening at home or with a guardian. If they're like afraid to go to a certain location, like, I hate that babysitter, I don't want to go there, I don't want to go to school, I don't want to go to grandparents' house or whatever, that can also be an indication that they're afraid of that person for whatever reason. And pay attention to that, because kids find it's a lot harder for kids to lie about stuff like that than it is for an adult. And they'll show it in little signs. Of course, we never want to talk about this because it's horrible to think about, but in the cases of non-consensual abuse, it doesn't always involve contact. It could just be like comments that they're making to the child, watching them doing certain things, like coming into the bathroom with them, or exposing them to imagery. If they have a out of the ordinary knowledge of certain behaviors or things that adults do, that could be an indication, or it's a strong indication that somebody is exposing them to inappropriate content or inappropriate behavior. They could also be exposed to touching or actual acts. And in those cases, not only would they have the knowledge of these things, they might reenact them on toys, on themselves, on other students. In really severe cases, they might have infections in regions that they shouldn't. They could struggle to sit or walk, or be very, very uncomfortable with being touched. They might act secretive. And in all of these cases too, they can sometimes either wildly overeat or choose not to eat at all, pick at food, be very quiet, be very reserved, not want to interact with people in general, be very jumpy. And then with neglect, where you're not providing the children what they need, food, shelter, medicine, education, supervision, you can see that in their clothing might be tattered, they might be very dirty, they might smell, they might have things like fleas or bed bugs or head lice frequently. They might be showing themselves to be very skinny. They might get sick very frequently. They might be undereducated for what their age level is at. That one is a tiny bit easier to pick up on, because you can usually see the certain areas of care that aren't being met. But that is another form of abuse that you can see. And then they also might be told things that are very inappropriate non-sexually, such as like being told that there's a sinner for certain behaviors that are normal, or that they'll face crazy consequences for doing normal behaviors. That's called cultural spiritual abuse. A lot of people never really think of that as a form of abuse, but you can use like religion and spirituality to abuse a child, to fearmonger them, to make them feel like they're going to die, or they're inadequate, or that God doesn't love them, people don't love them because they're behaving or looking a certain way. And then there's also another form called digital abuse, which is, I would arguably say this is probably going to be more common with the teens, but it could definitely happen with younger kids. A online stalking, online harassment, control, posting pictures of them even though the child doesn't want it there, commenting really awful things on their children's photos, or like berating them online. Those can be forms of abuse and possibly windows into additional abuse that's happening behind the scenes. And then this one's not super common to my knowledge, but it is still a possibility. There's also financial abuse, where a parent is forcing the children to work and take the money to use for their personal gain, using their money as a way to control them. I would say that's probably more common with more adult children, or like teen children and stuff like that. But that is also another form of abuse. But in general, a child that is showing an unnatural fear of a caregiver is a sign that something is wrong. And you should not ignore that, because as I said, children when we are children, even teenagers, we want nothing more than the love and approval and acceptance of the people around us. And if you have gotten to the point that you want nothing to do with them, you want them out of your life, you don't want to go near them, you don't want to go in their house, you're afraid of them being near you, you don't want to talk to them, something is wrong. And those are the types of situations where, even if you don't want to be the snitch, even if you don't want to be nosy or whatever, look into it. Contact the police, contact a psychologist, because they're mandated reporters and they'll be able to judge whether or not that is a dangerous situation. They'll know who to go to. But contact somebody to let them know that something is potentially going wrong, because it is much better to be wrong and maybe that child is just mad at their parents or something like that, than it is to be wrong and not say anything and the child loses their life. So if you see signs that a child is being injured, even if it's an older child, stand up for them, because they might not have anyone else to help them. So yeah, I had to go over these because sometimes the signs that children are being abused are very subtle. And as adults, we have the responsibility to protect the people around us, whether or not we know them. And I've heard of some horrendous cases where a child was pulled out of school. The parents swore, "Oh, we're homeschooling," and then it turned out the child was dead. There was a family recently that just made the news because all three of the parents were like obese, and their daughter or sister, I forgot which it was, mentally challenged, she died of starvation. Wild to me that you could have three obese people in the family and the 13-year-old died of starvation. She was like 80 pounds when they found her. So you could be saving a life if you identify these types of behaviors and are able to get them the help. So there's a lot of resources online. There's anonymous numbers you can call. You can call 911. There's a lot of different methods that you can use to get help for a potentially in danger victim. And also, just to throw that in there, it doesn't have to be children. It could still be spousal abuse. It could still show up in people who are disabled and are in the care of somebody else. It's not just children that can show these signs, that can be subjected to this behavior. And so, yeah, if you see this in a person, make sure you get them the help they need.
That's not the one either. Shout outs. Beautifully said, beautifully done. I'm still trying to get my configurations in order. I'm gonna have to go back and look over that again. I hope this helps somebody. I hope this touches somebody's heart. Serious topic. It's not a joke. It's not trolling. It's not rage bait. We need more community. I ain't got nothing else to say. She said everything that needed to be said here. You enjoy the rest of your evening. I will see you guys tomorrow morning. King's Table. We got more to talk about. Y'all enjoy the rest of your evening. Drive safe. And we out. Oh, real quick, Ray, I don't want to mess your name up. ATH, appreciate you for pulling up. We will definitely chat. To answer your question, no, they're not. They're not. That's why it's like, but we'll figure that out. I will holler at you guys tomorrow. Y'all be easy.
Have a good day, everyone. Be safe.
Examining his own attitude.